I walked into my home office and found him elbow deep in my desk drawer. No knock, no warning. Just this guy in khakis standing there like he belonged, rifling through files that weren't his in a house he'd never been invited to. I didn't yell, didn't even shut the door. I just stood there holding my coffee and asked if he needed help finding something. He spun around with this cocky little smirk, like I'd interrupted him during an important meeting. Oh, hey, Sarah told me I could grab the quarterly reports. Said they were in your desk, just trying to help her stay on top of things. I nodded slowly. Right, she mentioned you might stop by. Then I gestured toward my desk chair. He's been waiting for you. The guy froze. You could see the confusion wash over his face, followed by something closer to panic. That's when the chair swiveled around. I've never seen someone lose color that fast. The man sitting in my chair didn't say a word. He was older, dressed simply but expensively. The kind of person you forget you met until you remember they sign off on careers and budgets. The intruder stammered something that sounded like "sir." Then his phone slipped out of his hand and hit the hardwood floor with a dull thud. Here's what people don't understand about workplace affairs. You think you're clever. You joke around in Slack, send flirty messages with just enough deniability, share memes late at night. What you forget is that someone's always watching the logs. HR doesn't delete activity records. Slack messages can be pulled in Discovery. And behind every sarcastic emoji, there might be someone quietly documenting everything. The older man in my chair raised one finger and the intruder shut up immediately. You accessed internal materials outside the approved network, he said calmly. Then you entered private property to retrieve them under someone's instructions. The guy's eyes darted between me, the printer, and the half-open drawer. I didn't know, I thought. You didn't ask, I cut him off. Because if you had, you'd know those files weren't what she told you they were. I walked over and locked the door. Now he was really paying attention. You know what's interesting, I said? You walk into a man's home office, not his cubicle or his workspace, his actual home, assuming the woman who lives here gave you permission. And you never stop to wonder why now? Why these specific files? Why on paper? The older man watched him like a hawk watching prey that thinks it still has somewhere to run. Please, the guy said. I didn't take anything. I didn't copy anything. You didn't need to, I replied. She did that weeks ago from our network, from our Wi-Fi. I have the MAC address logs if you want them. That's when reality started settling in. He wasn't dealing with a jealous husband and some office gossip. He'd walked into something much bigger, something planned. And the man behind my desk? His digital signature was still in the server admin logs. After today, so would this idiot's access trail. Later that evening, Sarah texted me. Dinner with the girls, don't wait up. Just emojis and vagueness, like she was already building an alibi. I texted back, when already home, we had company. Radio silence. The kind that vibrates under your skin because it's not just about what wasn't said, it's about what she suddenly couldn't say. She didn't come home until after 11. I was in the living room with a book I wasn't reading and scotch I hadn't touched. She walked in wearing a dress I'd never seen, the kind people wear when they want to be noticed. Oh, you're home early, she said, trying to sound surprised. I marked my page. Yeah, just in time. Your friend stopped by. Pause, too long. Friend? Mid-30s, nice shoes, terrible liar. Said you sent him for the quarterly reports. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh my God, Dylan. He was just being helpful. He forgot his phone, I said. He'll probably need it Monday at corporate. Her face twitched. That was the tell. She knew exactly who had been sitting in that chair. You didn't tell him anything, right? She asked, voice tight. Nothing he didn't already know, I replied, taking a sip of scotch. It's all just a misunderstanding, she tried. He was probably looking for something else, something we discussed at work. I set down my glass. You sent him into my home. He had his hand in my drawer. Not a shared workspace, not a company laptop, my personal desk, the one you said you never go near. She folded her arms and then unfolded them. Why are you making this a thing? He's just a coworker. You're being paranoid again. I stood up. I think you know exactly what this is, and I think you're hoping I haven't figured out how long it's been going on. She switched tactics. Look, maybe I should have mentioned it. We've been in a weird place lately, and sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who actually listens without judgment. There it was, the gaslighting. Of course, I said. The guy you text more than your sister. The one who reacts to all your stories with fire emojis. The one you tell everything to except when he's caught committing corporate breach in my office. That one. She looked down at her purse, like it could save her. You know what the worst part is? I continued. He didn't even hesitate. Walked in like he owned the place, like you'd promised him something, access, trust, or maybe both. Her lip twitched. Real guilt this time. I didn't know he'd actually go, she muttered. It was supposed to be a joke. I turned the page of my book. Then maybe next time, pick smarter pawns. The trap wasn't about catching them. It was about watching what they did once they realized they were already inside it. It started 2 weeks earlier with a lunch meeting. I'd reached out to Brandon Cole, the interim CEO at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. That was Sarah's company, technically our company, since I'd helped build it a decade ago before cashing out pre-IPO. I left before it became the bloated bureaucracy it is now. Sarah never saw me as anything more than some tech guy who used to do startups, which made this meeting delicate. We met at a diner in the industrial district. No power ties, no forced networking, just greasy booths and good coffee where two men talking wouldn't draw attention. Brandon arrived exactly on time. He wasn't flashy, never had been. We'd worked together back when it was just 5 of us fighting for beta testers. Now he wore the suit and carried the weight of cleaning up the company's messes. What are we looking at? He asked, skipping pleasantries. I slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were access logs, timestamps, VPN tunnels routed through our home IP address. Not just hers, ours. Brandon scanned the pages, his eyes narrowing at a draft watermark visible only under blue light. A security measure I'd designed years ago that was still catching people. This was accessed from your house? He asked. 3 separate times, late at night, once while I was asleep. Who had the credentials? She did, through her team's shared sandbox. Said she was proofreading quarterly reports. I believed her until I checked the history. Brandon smirked. And the guy? You've seen the HR logs, the way she champions him in meetings, covers his mistakes, reroutes oversight, all subtle but consistent. I nodded. I had the firewall catch anything touched by his account. He's not as clever as he thinks. Brandon took a sip of coffee. What's your endgame? I want to see the look on his face when he realizes who's been watching the whole time. That's when Brandon leaned back and said the line that set everything in motion. Let me sit in that chair just once. I want to see his face, too. It wasn't revenge for him. It was something colder. Brandon didn't care about affairs or disrespect. He cared about data security, corporate fraud, and what it did to stock values. This isn't personal, he added. Agreed. He tapped the file. We handle this clean and quiet. You invite him into the trap, I'll be waiting. We keep legal on standby. I don't want a scandal. I want a resignation and full cooperation. Understood. He stood and left cash on the table. One more thing. If she's involved directly or not, I want to see her face too. When I got home that night, Sarah was watching TV in our bedroom, wine glass half full, phone lighting up every 15 seconds. She looked up and smiled. You're late. Everything okay? I kissed her forehead. Just lunch with an old friend. Then I went downstairs, opened my old laptop, and rechecked the watermark code. It still worked. She never saw it, neither did Dylan. But come Monday, they both would. The first thing I noticed wasn't that the cabinet was unlocked. It was that it had been relocked wrong. You only catch that if you're the one who locked it originally. I always lock it twice. Once to close it, once to make sure nobody thinks it matters. I opened it and stared. 2 files were gone, both stamped archive draft, obsolete in red. You had to really know what to look for to find them. She did. They weren't the newest versions. That's what made them perfect. The newest versions had been moved weeks ago. The files in this cabinet were bait, designed to be stolen, watermarked with embedded time tags invisible unless you knew the right hash to trace. She knew enough to recognize keywords, enough to know the patents were pre-public, enough to think she was pulling something clever. But not enough to see that every page she touched would bleed metadata into the audit trail. I stood there, not angry. Validated. The bait had worked. A few weeks earlier, she'd slipped. She'd left Slack open on the living room tablet. The messages weren't even about me. They were about him. Dylan, need that version you mentioned from Q3. Yours was cleaner than mine. Can you check if it's in your husband's stuff? He's got the draft somewhere, I think. Followed by a winking emoji. That was the first clue. The second came when I walked into the office after she'd been cleaning. The cabinet was locked, but wrong. My key scraped the tumblers differently. She hadn't relocked it with the same pressure. So I waited. That night I pretended to fall asleep on the couch. She tiptoed into the office. I didn't follow, just checked the smart thermostat app. Room sensors confirmed movement for 5 minutes. She was fast, but not careful. The next morning, I replaced the originals with copies. Still authentic enough to fool someone mid-level, just outdated enough to cause damage if used without verification. I wanted them to steal it. That was the point. Then I uploaded the hash versions to a closed compliance folder at Meridian, one Brandon and I had set up. They were tracking everything now. Access logs, print logs, device fingerprints, download paths, remote queries. The whole network was laced with traps. She tried to cover her trail. Deleted her search history, cleared PDF previews. She didn't know I'd already mirrored the drive weeks ago. Even her Slack messages, she edited them, changed drafts to slides, shifted context. She didn't realize admin view shows original edits in plain text. When you lie professionally, in meetings and negotiations and quarterly reviews, you forget that lies have a shelf life. Metadata doesn't. That morning, she kissed me goodbye before heading to client calls. She looked relaxed, maybe even smug, like someone who'd pulled off a magic trick and assumed nobody was watching. I kissed her back. Good luck with the slides. She paused for just a split second. Then she was gone. I walked into the office and confirmed what I already knew. The 2 obsolete drafts were missing. The game had started. And the second she copied those files, she didn't just steal bad data. She entered a chain of custody. That's where her story stopped being flirtatious and started becoming forensic. Monday morning, Dylan walked into the office like he owned the place. Coffee in hand, lanyard swinging, aviators on indoors. He high-fived someone from operations, winked at the receptionist, flashed that I'm going places grin. That stopped when 2 compliance officers appeared at his cubicle and asked him, very politely, to come with them. Now? Yes, conference room B. Should I bring my laptop? Won't be necessary. His grip on his coffee tightened. Small things reveal everything. Inside conference room B, 3 people were already seated. Company legal counsel, senior compliance analyst, and me. Or rather, me sitting at the far end, silent, watching. He stopped smiling. What's this about? He asked, forcing casual. The compliance officer didn't look up. Have a seat, Dylan, legal began. We're investigating a potential breach of internal data policies regarding protected intellectual property. You've been named in the incident. He scoffed. That's ridiculous. I haven't taken anything. Nobody argued. Instead, a folder was placed in front of him. He opened it. Top page, audit trail from his company laptop. Drive access logs, file download timestamps, IP matches. Next page, internal Slack messages. Not just hers. Third page, a security camera still from my hallway. Friday, him frozen mid-turn, hand in my drawer. His voice caught. I wasn't stealing, she asked me to. Who is she? Compliance asked. He hesitated. Legal leaned forward. Dylan, we're not here to speculate. We're here to assess liability. Multiple indicators show unauthorized file access, off-network retrievals, confidential material downloaded to a device registered in your name, and now physical presence on private property where those files were stored. He glanced at me. I didn't speak, didn't blink, just kept my gaze on him like a specimen under glass. It wasn't my idea, he said quietly. I didn't even know they were sensitive. She just said to grab them so we could clean up the presentation before next week's review. She's a director. I thought it was fine. Directors don't have authority to override compliance protocols, legal replied coolly, especially not on IP flagged as restricted by the parent company. The folder closed. Silence. You know, compliance said, it's ironic. We tracked all this because of a watermark, a digital fingerprint embedded in those drafts you copied. Our system flagged it because of how obsolete the version was. The newer ones wouldn't have pinged. Dylan swallowed hard. That was the real sting. The only reason he was in that room was because he and Sarah had been greedy, too eager, too sure nobody was watching. I finally spoke. You made one mistake. You thought this was about two people sneaking around, but it never was. This wasn't about jealousy or marriage. This was about access. You crossed a professional line and now you're in a professional cage. He opened his mouth, then stopped. There was nothing left to say. The worst part wasn't that he was being reprimanded. It was that the people across from him weren't angry. They were disappointed. Sarah was laughing at some upscale restaurant when the call came through. White linen, impossible parking, overpriced salads. She was holding court with coworkers, phone face down on the table, like she was too present to care. Then the screen buzzed. Brandon Cole, corporate line. She froze, not visibly, just subtly. She excused herself and took the call near the bathroom hallway. Hi, Brandon, what's up? She said it too bright. His voice was surgical. We're placing you on temporary leave. Pause. Wind knocked out. Excuse me? This is in connection with a potential breach involving an employee with known personal ties to you. Internal audits traced off-network access to restricted materials through a domestic IP linked to your home. This coincided with a physical incident. That employee named you. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Brandon continued. You'll receive an email requesting a formal statement. Your system access has been suspended. Please return your badge and laptop by end of day. This isn't disciplinary yet, but legal has questions. Brandon, I didn't authorize anything. He misunderstood. That's not what your Slack messages suggest. The call ended. She stood there, phone in hand, as restaurant noise bled back into her ears. A minute passed, then another. She didn't go back to the table, didn't pay, just grabbed her bag and left. When she walked into the house, 15 minutes later, she expected chaos. Instead, she found me sitting on the kitchen stool, flipping through a newspaper, coffee in hand, calm. She dropped her bag on the counter. You told them. No, I replied without looking up. He told them, I just watched. She exhaled sharply. This is out of control. They think I planned this. Didn't you? Her head snapped up. Of course not. I didn't know he'd actually go through your stuff. I looked at her. But you told him where it was. Hesitation. You suggested it. More silence. I leaned back. You involved someone in my house. That was your mistake. She crossed her arms. I didn't think it was that serious. That's because you thought this was about us. But once he touched that drawer, it stopped being personal. It became procedural. You're blowing this way out of... I stood slowly. No. You were just pretending it wasn't already drowning you. She opened her mouth for some rehearsed speech about pressure and stress, but I raised a finger. This isn't about your guilt. This is about your pattern. What pattern? You always think you're the smartest person in the room, but you forgot whose room it was. She flinched. Check your email. Legal's waiting. Where are you going? I looked at her one long moment, not angry, not triumphant, just disappointed. To finally finish something I should have ended 6 months ago. And I left her standing in a house where she'd lost not to infidelity, not even to ambition, but to arrogance. She waited until after sunset. No makeup, hair pulled back, trying to look smaller. The kind of woman who just made a mistake, not the one who orchestrated quiet theft via her work partner. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, slow instrumental music humming from the counter speaker. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said from the doorway. I didn't look up. Define this. She walked in slowly. You've made your point. He was stupid. I was stupid. But I didn't steal anything. I didn't even open the files. It was just a bad decision. Bad decisions burn toast, I said, still typing. This was coordinated, calculated. You just didn't think anyone was calculating back. She sat across from me, trying to find the version of me that used to comfort her. But that version had been replaced, like a software update you don't notice until everything works differently. I didn't think I was crossing any legal line. It's our house. Your work stuff's everywhere. Those aren't the ones that trip the clause. She paused. What clause? I reached into the folder beside me and slid out a document. Placed it between us. It wasn't long, just a page and a half. Titled in bold, Contingency Clause, Section 14B, Intellectual Property and Marital Trust Breach. Dated 6 months ago. She stared. What is this? Remember the prenup update we did last fall after the equity liquidation? You said it was about tax revisions. It was, partly. But you insisted on keeping things fair if either of us ever broke trust. Your word. Her fingers hovered above the page. I never thought. I didn't read every paragraph. We were rushed. You always read everything, except the things that protect both of us from exactly this. She scanned it now. Each line hit harder. In the event of unauthorized disclosure, transfer, or access to proprietary business materials owned by Party A, initiated or enabled by Party B, all jointly held assets will immediately shift to escrow status pending breach arbitration. She looked up. You're putting everything on hold. I'm not putting it. You triggered it. Her breath caught. So that's it? You flip a switch and freeze everything? You're going to erase the marriage over a favor I shouldn't have done? I leaned in. You didn't just cheat. You collaborated. You involved a third party. You sent him into my office. You misused shared access. Do you know what that looks like on paper? She trembled. I didn't think it through. I thought we were still okay. I almost smiled. You thought we were okay because I let you believe we were. You thought silence meant safety. All it meant was structure. She stood suddenly. I'm not letting you erase everything we built. You already did, I said calmly. You just didn't notice when. She looked at her signature on the paper. This is insane. We're married. You can't just... I stood too, slower, firmer. I can and I did. The moment you weaponized my trust to impress your protege, you turned our marriage into a transaction. So now I'm treating it like one. She started to cry. The confused, broken kind when weight finally registers. I walked past her without another word, left the document on the table. Her sobbing didn't sound angry. It sounded cornered. From this point on, she wasn't negotiating with a husband. She was dealing with compliance. By Tuesday morning, silence had settled over Meridian headquarters. Not chaos, but something colder. Calendar invites vanished without explanation. One-on-ones disappeared. Hallway whispers ended in, "Have you heard anything official?" By noon, the memo dropped. Ongoing internal review of data security protocols. It came from legal, sanitized, precise, avoiding names but not consequences. In light of recent irregularities in document management and IP access, we've initiated a comprehensive compliance review. All personnel should be advised of heightened audit protocols effective immediately. Just like that, the narrative was no longer hers to control. That afternoon, Brandon stood before the executive board. Preliminary findings suggest possible breach of protected intellectual property via unauthorized access on a non-secure domestic network. We have accepted the resignation of one employee and placed another on unpaid administrative leave. No names, but everyone knew. By evening, Dylan had removed his name from Slack, archived all posts, deactivated LinkedIn, just gone. And Sarah. Her name hadn't been mentioned once. But her badge no longer worked on the executive floor. Her laptop had been remotely wiped. When she tried logging into email from her phone, one alert waited. Your credentials have been flagged. Please schedule a formal statement with internal affairs within 72 hours. No greeting. Just compliance and a timestamp. It wasn't personal anymore. It was about system logs, timelines. Her betrayal had officially become a case number. She texted me that night. We need to talk. Please, just us. No reply. She called twice. Both rang. Neither answered. Across town, I sat in a quiet bar with Brandon, watching a headline flash on the TV. Meridian Pharma confirms internal security review amid alleged leak. Brandon chuckled without humor. That should wipe her professional presence clean for a while. She did it to herself, I replied, finishing my drink. Still, Brandon mused, she had potential. Shame she used it to impress a guy who thought Control-C was strategy. We didn't toast. Just let the moment pass. Back at the house, she sat in the dark, surrounded by stillness that no longer felt like home. She showed up to mediation in a blazer too stiff and a smile, seconds from cracking. Private conference suite downtown, neutral ground. No courtroom, no press. Just a round table, filtered water, and 3 people who knew too much. She brought her lawyer, sharp and overconfident, who kept calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. I didn't bring a lawyer. I brought a document. Look, she began, I know things escalated, but I think it's best if we avoid court. No filings, no public blowback. Just walk away clean. No damage to your reputation or mine. I'll sign a mutual release. Her lawyer nodded. We're prepared to sign today. Confidentiality clauses, mutual non-disparagement, NDAs. We want this closed. I sat back. Then I opened my folder. One page, a single statement in bold. I, Sarah Mitchell, accept full responsibility for the breach of proprietary data via unauthorized access enabled by my actions. I understand this constitutes material breach of trust and will forfeit all claims to compensation, severance, and equity as outlined in the prenup and corporate policy. She stared. You're joking. That's not a release. That's a confession, her lawyer snatched it. Absolutely not. There's no reciprocity. You're asking her to assume total liability. That's the point. You'll never get that in court. This isn't going to court. This is your one chance to keep it out. Humid silence. You really want to destroy me? She asked. No, you did that. I'm just filing the paperwork. Her lawyer whispered about optics, discovery, subpoenas, jury exposure. Sarah didn't respond, just stared at the line where her name was printed, the pen beside it. I lose everything if I sign this. I tilted my head. Not everything, just the version of yourself you pretended to be. She didn't look at me again, just picked up the pen. Her lawyer grabbed her wrist. Don't do this, we can fight. She pulled away, signed, no flourish, just ink. By the following Monday, her name was purged from all systems. Outlook revoked, server permissions terminated, Slack deactivated, LinkedIn updated by omission. Corporate bio vanished. Her severance, $0, no bonus, no equity, no parting words, just erased. I never posted about it, never gloated. But across the city, recruiters knew. Hiring boards knew. Slowly, everyone else did too. She wasn't fired. She was voided. Not by vengeance, by protocol. 3 months. That's how long it took for the world to stop saying her name like it mattered. First came restructuring, budget optimizations, then interviews that never called back. Recruiters who ghosted mid-conversation. Former colleagues suddenly unsure they had hiring authority. She downsized her apartment, traded in her car, started freelancing under a different name. Initials only. Vague LinkedIn bio. No past companies listed. She told friends she was pivoting to consulting, finally in control of her time. But the truth showed in unpaid invoices, ignored pitches, the ache of becoming forgettable. Then came the box. Plain brown. No return label. Just there in the lobby with her name in Sharpie. Inside, a single phone. Black case, worn edges. Dylan's phone. Dead screen, no charger. Just the device and a piece of paper taped to the front. 5 words. Never send pawns into offices. No signature, no threats, just that. She didn't cry. She sat on the floor of her tiny apartment and read the line again, 'cause that's all he ever was. Not a partner, a tool, a disposable one. She hadn't loved him. She'd used him, fed him attention, gave him assignments, whispered praise, just enough to keep him predictable. And now he was completely off-grid. No social media accounts, no casual posts lingering anywhere. Not even an old profile photo buried on some forgotten platform. No trace of him in search results. No metadata. Nothing to suggest he had ever existed online at all. Erased, cleanly and deliberately, as if by someone who truly understood how to disappear. The last email she'd sent him weeks ago still sat in her outbox, with that same stubborn notification, undelivered. No bounce-back explanation, no server error, just digital silence. It felt less like a technical issue and more like a door quietly but firmly shut in her face. She opened her laptop again, hoping for... She didn't even know what. Maybe a new notification, maybe a miracle. Instead, she found herself staring at the last freelance pitch she'd submitted. The one she'd spent days polishing, rewriting, and second-guessing. Still marked unread, untouched, like it had never passed through human eyes. Another dead end. The silence wasn't just personal now. It was professional, permanent. Because this wasn't a lesson. It was a log entry. And in a system built by people like the one she'd tried to deceive, her name had become exactly what it sounded like. Redacted.